My name is Hannah and I work in the education team at the National Archives. We're the official government archive for England and Wales. We're going to be exploring a document relating to the partition of British India. First, here is Iqbal, my colleague, to tell you about his story.
My name is Iqbal. I work at the National Archives. I was born in London and my parents came from India and Pakistan. My mother is Sikh and my father is Muslim. They met on a ship coming to London. I have grown up with the story of partition in my family, aware from a very young age of the so-called differences between Muslims and non-Muslims. And yet I grew up in a home where my mother shared many similar interests in food, music and dress with my father. I did not learn about anything to do with the partition of British India when I was at school. Later in the video, my aunt will talk about how my family made their way across the border from what is now Pakistan into India. Here is Eleanor, who will tell you more about her work as a historian.
My name is Eleanor Newbegin, and I research and teach about the history of South Asia at SOAS University of London. I actually also have a family connection to India. My dad and aunts grew up in South India because my grandfather was a religious missionary there. This is of course a very different connection to India than Iqbal's. My family isn't from the region, but it was very much part of my family history. Like Iqbal, I never learned about British colonial history, so I didn't understand how my dad's family had ended up being out in India, and wanting to find out more about that is one of the things that led me to become a historian of this region. The partition of British India occurred in August 1947, when the British government withdrew from India after almost 200 years of British rule. People in British India had called for independence for decades, but until the early 1940s, very few people in Britain or in India would have thought that this independence would take the form of dividing up land. A very important reason for British rule in India was military resources, particularly soldiers. In 1942, a point of uncertainty in the war for Britain and of growing Indian opposition to colonialism, the British government announced that they would leave India after the war. There were many different political leaders and groups who disagreed about how to make everyone feel represented after Britain left. Muslims made up a quarter of the population, but these communities weren't spread evenly. There were a few areas where Muslims made up the majority of the population. There were calls from some Muslim leaders for these regions to have greater independence. Divisions grew. By late 1946, British officials had given up on finding a solution in which many different groups could be represented within a single state. In February 1947, Lord Mountbatten was sent to oversee Britain's withdrawal. On the 3rd of June 1947, he stunned everyone by announcing, with leaders Jawaharlal Nehru and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, that Britain would give power to not one but two new governments, the Government of India and the Government of Pakistan, a year earlier than previously planned. Officials from Britain and British India were given just 9 weeks to work out how British India would be divided. The final borders split the eastern and western areas of British India and ran through the provinces of Punjab and Bengal, important areas economically and politically with a population of roughly 50% Muslims. Independence was declared on the 14th and 15th of August 1947, but the borders of these two nations were announced 2 days later, on the 17th of August. This meant that people celebrated independence without knowing for sure quite where the line between these two new countries would be drawn. People living in the regions affected by partition felt scared and uncertain about their future, not wanting to end up on the wrong side of the border. In the months around August 1947, over 15 million people are thought to have migrated across the new borders. In Punjab in particular, this huge human migration was accompanied by brutal violence that we can see as a reflection of the fear and uncertainty of what was going on, of the future.
We are now going to take a look at one of our documents. I have this file in front of me. Let's take a look inside. Immediately, the word Punjab stands out for me. This document focuses on the division of the area of the Punjab that Eleanor mentioned, West Punjab, Pakistan and East Punjab, India. It says, since Independence Day, 15th of August, 1947, so I think these documents are going to relate to the aftermath of the partition of British India. It's interesting that they haven't used that term though. At the archives, document codes often reveal which government department the document has come from. For instance, HO would be Home Office. This code is DO and stands for Dominion Office. As India and Pakistan were now independent from Britain, they had become dominions, part of the Commonwealth, a group of countries that used to be British colonies. Just the size of this file shows that British officials were still deeply concerned with what was happening in India and Pakistan. We are now going to look through the document. We need to be really careful because the paper is really thin and delicate. First, we can see what type of document this is, a telegram. We don't use these today, but this is a message sent using wires. This was an expensive process, so people chose their words really carefully. It's being sent from India to British government officials responsible for the Commonwealth. It says UK High Commissioner, which means British officials in India reporting on the situation. It was sent at nearly 11 p.m. on the 23rd of September 1947, so just over a month after partition. Now we've started to think about this document, I need some help to understand it better from Eleanor. The report refers to people as non-Muslims and Muslims. Why do you think they do that?
This is a really generalised grouping, generalised term. In fact, people in British India were extremely diverse in terms of class, religious identity, caste and regional difference. Not all Muslims supported the Muslim League, who called for Pakistan, and the rest of the non-Muslim population weren't all Hindus. A key community were the Sikhs. And they were located in central Punjab. The western part of Punjab was predominantly comprised of Muslims, the eastern part of Punjab of Hindus. But as Sikh communities were smaller, they didn't have the same influence in the negotiations for the transfer of power. Whether or not to create Pakistan came to dominate discussions and came to be centred around a really simplistic idea that Muslims would want to go to Pakistan and non-Muslims would not. But this ignored the needs of a really diverse population.
One of the lines that really stood out to me was Muslim mob of 8,000 attack village. In this whole report, there's no mention of any individuals.
Yeah, and we might also want to ask about the figures that are used repeatedly in this text. 8,000 is so precise, and it gives this sense of authority. In fact, the whole telegram is presented as if it's completely factual, with British officials able to account for what's going on in spite of the violence, confusion and fear. We also need to ask why British officials are still there at all and why they're reporting back to London. Officials wanted to understand what was happening so they could secure whatever influence and power possible for Britain after independence. Also, many British officials were worried about how they would be judged by global public opinion for the violence.
When I turn the page of the document, there is a reference to a place that is important to my family, Dehradun. This is where my family moved to after partition. You are now going to hear the voice of my mother's younger sister's experience arriving in an area where most people spoke Hindi, a language she didn't speak.
I don't remember the word refugees. It came only when we decided we are going to Dehradun, because all the refugees are going towards Dehradun, Saharanpur, Roorkee, Delhi. We were about to reach Dehradun, a beautiful place. And that is where I remember, oh, they are refugees. They are the refugee girls. They are the refugee girls. You see, when the refugees were given houses which were left by the Muslims who went to Pakistan and the other way around. One very major trauma that in my mind is, I must tell you, is my father, who suffered the maximum, and he never laughed, never smiled easily because he could not get over. 23 years after partition, when he became ill, he kept on saying, let's go home, let's go home. And my mother said, we are home. No, let's go home. Because he was thinking home, that he's left behind. We were given this place, which belonged to Mr. Ansari, had a beautiful garden, 7 varieties of mangoes and lychees and all kinds of fruit. And then when I was thinking of my father saying, let's go home, I wonder Mr. Ansari must be missing his home, which became our home.
It is worth thinking about why we are at the National Archives, and the partition of British India happened nearly 5,000 miles away. Many British people don't learn about this history, but as we have seen, this is a story in which Britain was a central player. It is important to learn about this topic through examining a variety of sources in official government documents, one very important source. But we need to be careful to unpick these documents. They may present as factual accounts, but this could be misleading. In October 1947, Lord Ismay, who had been closely involved in the partition of British India, made the following comment. The last 2 months have been so chaotic that it would be difficult to find two people who agree how the trouble started, why it was not checked, what actually happened, and what is to be the outcome. As students, teachers and historians, our role is to try and explain why British rule ended with this devastation, the largest mass migration event in history and the deaths of over 1 million people.